Okay, wasn't that fun? Okay, so my topic's the legal classification of Bitcoin. Please excuse me if I'm a little tired. I've been in Singapore meeting with attorneys about Bitcoin. I flew in yesterday, direct flight from Switzerland, meeting with attorneys about Bitcoin. It's pretty simple. The Singaporean attorney, he said, quote, "Laws don't give an answer to what Bitcoin is." I mean, it's pretty simple. We're dealing with a technology that leaves it pretty much undefined. Not that that's much different from the United States dollar, for example. Under 26 U.S.C. 5101 through 5118, it gives the definition of a dollar. And you have the dollar being defined as 1 ounce of gold equals $50. You have 1 ounce of silver equals $1. You have pennies and nickels, and they've composed of different metals, and they all equal dollars. Then you've got Federal Reserve notes, and they equal a dollar, but obviously like 1/50th of an ounce of gold isn't equal to 1 ounce of silver. So like the dollar is unintelligibly defined under U.S. federal law. To make it even more difficult, under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5 of the U.S. Constitution, the federal government is given the power to coin money. Notice it's coined, not printed. And Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1, which is a restriction on what the states can make legal tender, says that no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. The 10th Amendment, which Lincoln made sure doesn't exist anymore but didn't repeal it, it reserves all rights not delegated to the federal government, to the states, or to the people themselves. So an issue arises of whether the states or the federal government could make Federal Reserve notes legal tender. And that is clearly answered under our constitutional law as no. Of course, that question is not going to be raised or even addressed by the Supreme Court, which leaves us in the problem that we're in. We've got an undefined dollar, we've got an undefined Bitcoin, and we've got market participants and actors that are engaged in human action to engage in commerce. And it makes things difficult because gold and silver are not merely medium of exchanges, but they're essential checks and balances in the political machinery. That's why they're in the Constitution. They belong in the same areas of constitutions, bills of right, because they stand as bulwarks against despotic inroads on the part of government as these checks and balances. And so Bitcoin becomes very interesting in this regard because we've got an information technology. For example, Congress shall make no law regarding this freedom of speech or of the press. Well, what's a private key but speech, right? It's an apparently random string of text. And yet with that string of text, you're able to solve a math problem that other people aren't able to solve very easily, and in the process move digits in a distributed computing ledger that's governed under the MIT license and distributed worldwide on lots of computers. So it makes it interesting in this regard. Mary Ann, who was up here, she was gracious enough to invite me to speak for about an hour to some of these top regulators, members of the Fed, members of the Bundesbank, top banks over there in Austria a couple months ago. And it was an objective presentation. So, I put a slide up of Silk Road. We all know what Silk Road is. But Bitcoin can't exclude people from using it. And so I put it up there, and then I put up a slide of the My Wallet adoptions from blockchain, and it's like, this is where PayPal shut off service to the torrents, and all the customers came over to Bitcoin. And part of this is because Bitcoin lowers the cost in terms of time. It's much quicker to be able to transmit these payments using this new protocol. You know that your transaction's sent instantaneously. Once you get confirmations, it's no fraud, no chargebacks. So it's a lot cheaper to send it, so it lowers the cost in terms of time, in terms of money, and as we've talked about, it lowers the cost in terms of privacy. Switching a little bit to a persuasive argument, well, why would we want privacy? I mean, obviously Silk Road wants privacy because they're doing things that are against the laws in many nations, but there are other reasons. For example, Matt Mullenweg, who founded WordPress, and is a co-investor in a company that I'm invested in. You know, WordPress is about freedom of speech. Remember, Congress shall make no law. Well, what if you're Tariq Aziz, 16-year-old? Department of Homeland Security says that there's no credible evidence that children have been killed in drone strikes in the Middle East. Tariq's family was all killed in a drone strike at a wedding. So Tariq got this idea. Being 16, he'd go out and take pictures of children who've been killed in drone strikes. He presented these pictures to a bunch of human rights attorneys in Islamabad at an investigative journalist symposium. Over 175 children documented as being killed in drone strikes. About a week after that, Tariq and his 12-year-old cousin, who also assisted in helping him take these photographs, were both targeted specifically and assassinated by the Obama administration. So now the Obama administration is targeting and assassinating children for political speech. Tariq might want privacy when he's exercising his freedom of speech. Antonin Scalia of the United States Supreme Court in an interview basically said, like, money is speech. And nowhere is that more evident than in Bitcoin, because it's just the private key. You know, it's just speech. For something interesting, you know, go Google illegal primes. The federal government thinks that it's completely that they have this power to make numbers, the publication of numbers, illegal. I mean, it's kind of baffling. But we've always seen this type of resistance, you know, whether it's Copernicus with heliocentric theory, whether it's Galileo, you know, anytime we have innovation, anytime the world, you know, anytime we have a genius like Newton who wants to move the world forward, we receive resistance from the status quo in some way. And so Bitcoin's really no different. We've got these FinCEN guidelines, which, by the way, are neither binding nor determinative. They're just kind of guidelines. I think they're pretty useful if you want to operate a business and do it in a legitimate way. You at least know some of the rules that if you're following them, then you can say, look, I made a good faith effort to follow your rules. Like, please don't send a drone after me. But, but I mean, that's ultimately what it's about, right? They want us to follow their rules, and if we don't follow their rules, then they send a drone after us. And even in some cases where you are following their rules and you're merely taking photos of children who've been killed in drone strikes, they'll send a drone after you. So they'll engage in arbitrary and capricious persecution for political means, based on political speech. But like under the FinCEN guideline, the fellow made a comment over there, and I mean, here it is directly from the FinCEN guideline. A user who obtains convertible virtual currency and uses it to purchase real or virtual goods or services is not a money service business under FinCEN's regulations. Such activity in and of itself does not fit within the definition of money transmission services and therefore is not subject to FinCEN's registration, reporting, and record-keeping regulations for MSBs. The way I see it under the law is that a money transmitter is, well, first, FinCEN wants to define location based on identity, not necessarily based on geography. So anytime there's a facilitation between moving funds from person A to person B, like in terms of location, whether the funds are like in the same bank account and you're just reallocating it in the exchange account from person A to person B, that's considered a change in location. That's the money transmission, because they want to be able to follow this audit trail of the money between different identities. And so if you're running an exchange, it'd be wise to have the AML, have the KYC, be keeping the audit trail, the records, things of that nature. But once the person obtains convertible virtual currency, you know, and withdraws it out of your exchange, like what they do with it outside of there, the FinCEN guidelines weren't too like determinative on that. And like Larry said, you know, there are just a ton of loopholes there. Another distinguishment that should be made kind of legally is like, you know, I've got 2 Singaporean dollars right here. Here's 100 Thai baht. You know, I could show $1. What those things have in common is that they're currency or funds. whereas Bitcoin is not. And the distinguishment is that these are legal tender for all debts, public and private, within a particular geographical jurisdiction that's under the government of a particular state. And so, like, Bitcoin is not legal tender in that sense. Like, you can't. That's
just saying it's not a sovereign currency.
Yeah, it's not. Well, it's not legal tender just because something's gold and silver are not legal tender either, right? I mean, they're not sovereign currency, but they're still legal tender. So Iceland, for example, could make Bitcoin legal tender, and then it'd be considered currency or funds. But as it currently stands, we don't have Bitcoin defined as legal tender in any particular jurisdiction. See the difference there? Like, you can have an asset which is a commodity, like gold or silver, and a state can make it legal tender. Or the state can print politicized currency like dollars or euros and then make those legal tender under their statutes.
Can I pay my taxes in gold? I didn't think I could.
Gold is legal tender. Yes, you could pay your taxes in gold. The Kayer case, which is an interesting one, raises the issue of how do you define the dollar in that case, right? Do you take the $1,400 Federal Reserve note price, or do you take the $50 legal tender price under federal law? And the Kayer case, I mean, it's a $100 million tax case. Like, it's an issue. Like 2503B gift tax, $13,000. I mean, they aren't defining whether that's Federal Reserve notes or gold. So, I mean, if you're moving a bunch of gold coins and they're $50 a piece, or are they $1,400 a piece for that particular legislation? Because after $1,300, I mean, you start eating into your gift tax exemption or reporting requirements. But like I said, even the dollar is undefined, and Bitcoin's undefined also under our law. So, I mean, it's very complicated. And then to make it even more complicated, like I was talking with one of the attorneys in Switzerland, is that we have all these differing jurisdictions, and there's really no kind of comprehensive legal rules. So if you're operating legally in Singapore, you may not be operating legally in the U.S. or in the Netherlands or whatever. So, I mean, it's just part of moving into this information age where we have new technology.
Sorry, just a quick question. If I wanted to pay my taxes in gold here in the U.S., how would I actually go about doing that?
You'd, mail it in, I guess. I mean...
Single example of someone doing that.
What's that?
Can you cite a single example of someone doing that?
There is an example where somebody actually went and paid with 1 ounce silver coins to the county clerk, but they only gave him the $1 face value as they're defined under legal tender. They didn't give him the $24, whatever market price is, in Federal Reserve notes. I mean, but that's part of the problem, right? But I suppose you could do it if you wanted.
This might be derailed. We went back to the no sovereign state as
Boy, that would. Yeah, I think it would begin to change kind of the nature of the definition of it. We'd probably be able to. It'd probably easily get an ISO code. We might see different rules from the IMF that would govern it based on whether Antigua's membership with the central banking and all that. I mean. Good or bad of who or what? Oh, I mean, that's speculation based on market action. I mean, it'd be hard to kind of figure that out. Yeah, sure.
Follow up on the issue of paying your taxes with gold or silver, and that actually happened in Las Vegas. There was
the Kayer case.
Exactly. Now, the only problem he had is he was keeping 2 sets of books. If he had kept them such that he was only looking at the legal tender value, the government's case probably would have collapsed. But he kept 2 sets of books, and that's what screwed him.
Well, actually, what screwed him is that he wasn't filing the 1099s appropriately. But I mean.
If he only kept track of things as legal tender, which was his scheme, none of his contractors would have been paid more than the value that was the minimum for a 1099. That's what he was doing.
Right.
If he kept 2 sets of books, and that's how they busted him. If he would have kept just 1 set, everything would have been legal tender value of gold. the government's case would be extremely weak.
Yeah, well, I thought the government's case was extremely weak anyways. But the Singaporean attorney, he made another question, raised another point that, like, from accountancy for profits and taxes, like, Bitcoin definitely raises lots of issues there. And, like, don't have 2 or 3 or 4 sets of books, right? Randolfo? Oh, I'll repeat the question.
Hello. In Argentina, it's very common that you done things wrong before they were wrong to be done, no? If you are in Bitcoins now, yes, and there's no regulation on it, and you have them, and you bought them $2, yes, perhaps 2 years later, it's beyond the law to do it in a formal way, and you are 2 years, you've been 2 years against the law. I mean, it's like, I'm a Spanish speaker, so it's a bit difficult for me. Yes, it's gone. It's retracted.
Retroactive.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how is this? How do you think this is in other countries? Because the problem is not if it will be convicted to use or not or bitcoins, but if what we are doing right now will be in the future wrong because we've been doing it when it was not yet wrong. I don't know if...
Yeah, I mean, in the U.S. Constitution, ex post facto laws are, you basically can't make them. Of course, there's lots of things that the Constitution says that the federal government can't do, and it does anyways. So, I mean, yeah, what are we doing when we're dealing with these institutions that, one, don't follow their own rules, and two, when they do follow their rules, they do it in an arbitrary and capricious manner. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's definitely an issue for the public square. And I think that might be one of the reasons that Bitcoin is gaining such popularity, is because when you look at these legal tender politicized currencies, they're really just the common stocks of these organizations or institutions. And owning them is both a political choice but also an investment choice. And if you don't really think that these organizations or institutions have much future from a financial standpoint, then you aren't going to want to hold their common stock, and you'll want to hold something else like Bitcoin. So Bitcoin really does kind of become a kryptonite dagger in that sense, because it massively changes the rules of the game, because you can no longer censor the ability to transmit value over distance, which is what all these money transmitter laws are about. But two, it's an equity-based asset like gold or silver. And three, it's not subject to any counterparty risk, like Cyprus, the banks getting bailed out. And how that fractional reserve banking works is it allows for vote inflation, because they get the money first, and they can multiply it out, and then they're able to hire lobbyists and things like that. And so it really, Bitcoin flattens and decentralizes a lot of these issues, and that's why I would, when legally classifying it, kind of throw it in the same area as sound money, because it really becomes a check and balance in the political machinery, and is right there with freedom of speech, because it's just speech, really, as Antonin Scalia is talking about money.
I have a Bitcoin lending service, and I quite don't understand. Hello. Well, I have a Bitcoin lending service, and it's a peer-to-peer lending site. And I not quite really understand why, because with Bitcoin, I can send Bitcoins to you using my wallet. But if I have a service that will send my Bitcoins to you, but is the server wallet that is doing that, I'm not sure if this, because then I will be transmitting Bitcoins from me to you. But I already can do that. I don't need a service to do that. So I don't understand why transmitting Bitcoin is considered against the law, because users don't need transmitters to transmit Bitcoin. My question is, if I only transmitting Bitcoin in my service, I'm I can do that. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I think this might be kind of the problem because it sounds like English isn't your natural language. Like transmit is a legal term of art. Like just like making a Bitcoin transaction does not necessarily mean that it's been transmitted from under kind of the legal term of art. The money transmission would be, facilitating the movement of money between party A and party B. So something that like Western Union does. Not necessarily just moving the money. That's not necessarily transmission under the legal term of art. Right, yeah, and they're definitely.
Can you define money service business as opposed to money transmitter? Because FinCEN has come down and ruled on money service business, right?
Yeah, I mean, you've got a difference between what an MSB is and an MT.
But they haven't ruled on money transmission. Because we're doing the same thing.
Money transmitter is the type of
So it has been coined a term to be a money transmitter?
No, if you're one of these MTs, right, and then you use Bitcoin in certain ways, that's where you would need to fall under the MT. Is that?
I think so what FinCEN did is they basically provided clarification that if you're in certain types of businesses around Bitcoin, the exchange table or otherwise, then you are deemed to be a money transmitter, and then fall under the money service business umbrella. So the money transmission definition has been the same across the board. They just provided clarification that these certain types of businesses around Bitcoin specifically, or virtual currency,
Right.
fall under the money transmission definition.
Yeah, and kind of to help you further understand the point, like, let's see, buys or sells convertible virtual currency or any reason is a money transmitter under FinCEN regulations unless a limitation to or exemption from the definition applies to the person. Exception 31 CFR section 1010. One of them might be physically transport currency or other monetary instruments like an armored car service. So if you're running the armored car service, you're not a money transmitter, like even though you're moving the dollars around, right? And the reason is, as best as I can see, is because you're not actually facilitating the movement of the dollars from party A to party B. You're moving the dollars for party A from location A to location B, but it's not moving from party A to a different party. And that's kind of the distinguishment for the money transmission rules. Does that kind of help?
No. So BitPay is a
Well, BitPay is a payment processor. There's 6 different exceptions.
but they're still transmitting funds back and forth.
They're moving funds back and forth, but under the money, under the legal term of art of transmission, it falls under one of these exceptions, and there are like 6 different exceptions.
So, the question that I have is related to, I'll just wait for my phone.
So the question I have is related to the money transmission and how it applies to, you had mentioned earlier the conversation about sovereignty and whatnot. And while registering for FinCEN is not terribly difficult and it's free, and if you're doing a legitimate business, all's good and well. I don't think that's too much. That's where the problem is. But here, even within the United States, state by state, they may, if you're a money transmitter, you have different, licensing requirements, different fees you have to pay. Do you know of any organization or body, perhaps Bitcoin Foundation, that is moving towards standardizing that so companies that hope to operate within the United States don't have to go through the hurdle state by state? I think that is the barrier of entry right now, as opposed to perhaps the FinCEN part of it.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anyone that's trying to form like a, help harmonize that. And I mean, it takes like $25 million worth of bonds to register in all the different states, and they all have different rules. And yeah, it's a barrier to entry because they want to keep new entrants out. Western Union's earnings call back in November, yeah, we're facing increasing pressure from new entrants. That's why their stock's down like 60% or something. I mean, yeah, Bitcoin's definitely eating into some of that, and they don't necessarily want to make it easier for their new financial innovation and competition. Just like newspapers or buggy whips or whatever. David?
Hi, Trace. So it seems Bitcoin is defined as the knowledge of a private key.
Well, that would give you the ownership or control over being able to move the digits that are in the ledger.
So what if more than one person knows the same private key, like 100 people or 1,000 people? Who then really owns it, and how does this impact
that's
this kind of stuff?
Yeah, there's plausible deniability. In a lot of cases,
Well,
we don't want
deniability.
someone to know our private key because then they steal our Bitcoins, right? But these are definitely issues that can be raised.
It takes it into a whole new realm of ownership when you say multiple people can know the same thing and they're under an agreement maybe not to use it against themselves, but who really owns it?
Well, and
How do
that,
these
yeah, I
rules
mean,
work?
and I've actually kind of, tried to address the issue, like whether there can be a property right interest in Bitcoins. Like I was discussing this with Stephen Kinsella because, we've got this decentralized distributed network, and it's just like where the Bitcoins are allocated in that ledger, but the ledger is governed under the MIT license, and everybody has possession of all of the Bitcoins all of the time if they've got the blockchain. Right? So just because person A can have more ownership, control or dominion over them, I mean, does that impart the actual legal title to them? And how we trace title in our traditional Western common law areas. I mean, gives us lawyers can have all types of fun with this.
Do you know where we stand right now in terms of a business that wants to be 100% Bitcoin or 100% virtual currency, as long as they accept payment in virtual currency and pay their workers in that, and they never go into a fiat? What's the law right now in terms of that?
So so the hypothetical is you want to be running a business where you're basically Bitcoin denominated. You receive income in Bitcoin and you pay expenses in Bitcoin. The main issues I would see would be around the taxes, and I wrote a guide, A Lawyer's Take on Bitcoin and Taxes, with a partner on my website, How to Vanish, Bill Rounds. He's a California attorney down in Riverside. We have 55 legal citations where we try to take Bitcoin and figure out where it would reasonably fit. There's a foreign currency approach, there's a barter approach, there's several different approaches, and that'll help you determine what the recognition is on any potential gains or losses on the fair market value movement in the Bitcoin. Because I mean, if the salary is say $500, then you're just going to change based on the exchange rate. But when you send the Bitcoins, if you're using the foreign currency approach, then it would be at $500, and then because you'd have to translate all that into dollars for tax purposes, and that's how I think you could be as compliant as you could.
And that value is moving all the time. So what?
Right, but I mean, we have ways to do this under IFRS and GAAP and FASB to account for foreign currency. I mean, it's a very common practice for companies to be doing business in dollars and euros and Singaporean dollars, et cetera, and yen.
What do you think is going to be Bitcoin's last stand as an unregulated country region of the world?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Given the trend that Bitcoin is getting regulated, or at least there are attempts to regulate it, where do you think will be their last stand?
the ocean, probably. Like, no, I mean, really, because like the ocean's governed under admiralty law, and it's like no particular state jurisdiction. I mean, if you're running an exchange from like Blue Seed, right? It could be kind of fun. Oh, we're done? Okay, there we go.